Welcome back to Hospitality Folks. I'm your host, Alicia Dick Wahlberg. This week, I'm joined by Adam Molly, an international experienced culinary leader and operations director who has worked alongside some of the most celebrated Michelin-star chefs in Europe and North America, built fine dining concepts for luxury hotel groups, and spent decades studying what it actually takes to lead great teams in this industry. Today, we're diving into something that really doesn't get talked about nearly enough: the toxic kitchen culture that so many of us either witnessed, survived, or if we're honest, we're a part of. Adam shares what it took to unlearn it, what real mentorships look like at the highest levels of hospitality, and why the people we treat, from a first day stage to a veteran sous chef, defines everything. This one is honest, personal, and I think a lot of us are going to feel very seen. Let's dive in. Welcome, Adam, to Hospitality Folks. I am so excited to bring you on today to talk about your career and so many different topics. Maybe you could give a quick introduction of who you are and what you do.
Sure, it would be my pleasure. My name is Adam Malley, and I am currently the culinary director at Chase Center in San Francisco. I have had a rather long and varied career in hospitality, which is an industry that I love and fell in love with immediately when I started when I was a teenager as a dishwasher and thought that was the best job on the planet. I continued on and learned everything I could, which continues to this day. I never stopped learning. So that's one of the things I love about this industry is it's just a continuation of learning and growing and developing as a human being. So I was previously a culinary director for a large hotel group that managed properties all over the United States. And so in my career journey, my one quest is to hopefully end up working internationally in Europe. So that's where I am today.
I love that you started as something as so humble as a dishwasher, and now you are leading these large international working teams and corporations. What did the journey actually look like to go from dishwashing to working in the Michelin chef world?
It was a logical progression. Was I remember vividly when I was 15, I thought this was the most fun. It was like putting together a puzzle every day and organizing and making sure things were neat. And I probably have a bit of OCD, as any decent chef or F&B director or anyone in this industry should. Nothing to be ashamed of. It's a good thing. I wanted everything to go where it belonged. And then I had a blast. It was just, playing with water and working in the back of the kitchen. And so as a 15-year-old, I had no direction and I had just totaled my father's car and needed a job for the summer. And that's how I fell into this. And so I continued on and loved it and never wanted to do anything else and thought, this is it. I found what I want to do, my calling. And the next thing I knew, I was promoted to the prep crew. And so I remember working with, it was my first experience. I grew up in New York City. So in terms of having multiple cultures was not anything new to me. But being in a kitchen, it's different. I bonded with people from the Dominican Republic, from Jamaica, from Mexico, and became friends. These were my first friends. And it was crazy. Everything that you've read about in Anthony Bourdain and the lore is absolutely true. There were some insane stories, most of which I can't repeat here, but there were stories involving being chased with a cleaver at one point. And again, I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And next was promoted to a grill cook, entre métier. It just kept on going. The more I ascended, so to speak, the more I wanted to learn and I wanted to grow. And I was fascinated. I remember the first time I worked the grill, and then I was also terrified. It's almost like being on stage. When you have a station that you're managing yourself, you want to make sure that everything is, your mise en place is there, everything is lined up, you communicate well with the front of the house staff. And in that time period, I would say that communication was sketchy at best. The culture was, I think it's been glorified over the years, but it was definitely different. I think it's much better now. We're in a better place as an industry with a long way to go as well. But It was learning that drove me.
Absolutely. Now, you've once said that there is this essentially badass chef culture happening. Could you maybe, for someone who's not familiar with what it's like working in the kitchens or behind the scenes, essentially, what is a badass chef culture and what is it? Where does it come from?
So in a lot of kitchens, not all of them, certainly. I've had the experience of working in both. I've worked with a chef in France named Pierre Gagnère. He was absolutely the baddest ass chef ever. He holds multiple Michelin stars, is a joy to work with, is absolutely respectful of the people that work for him, but demands unwavering discipline, and rightly so. And that's how you get to that level. There are those that take a darker path, I should say, and become abusive. And unfortunately, in this model of behavior, it's learned. And they came up with a chef who threw things at them, yelled at them, berated them. You'll read a lot about in uh, I guess culture that the purpose of the kitchen at that level is to break you down and have you operate at a high level with no hesitation, wavering discipline, and listening to instructions without question. So it's almost cult like.
It sounds like a little like they're trying to create robots.
In a way, yes, you need to have a kitchen function like a Swiss timepiece. It's got to function like a machine. And that's with every kitchen. But taking the humanity away from people is not the way to get there, unfortunately. And as we've seen recently with Noma, their pop up in Los Angeles, it was exposed that Rene Redzepi had been abusing people for years. Unfortunately, he is not alone. I've worked with many chefs who practice this. As a young cook coming up, I not only took it, but I wore it as a badge of honor. I didn't speak up. I didn't say this is wrong. If you did speak up, heaven help you. You were over.
Yeah.
I worked briefly in a kitchen in England and saw this occurring. And I remember saying something and I almost got a pan thrown at my head and kept my head down. And so in that sense, I was part of the problem. And people do this, they put up with it because they want that cachet on their resume. They want to be associated with greatness. And I don't fault them for that, but no one should have to put up with that type of demeaning behavior. It's not what hospitality is about. It doesn't evoke greatness, in my opinion. You can be focused, you can be passionate and work as a well-oiled machine and a team and not humiliate people. And so I think the chefs who take that approach and become mentors and want their teams to grow and develop and realize that people have unique talents and finding those strengths and using them as opposed to um, getting people to submit and lose their humanity is not very pleasant. And I've lived it, and a lot of cooks and a lot of chefs have, and I've seen it from both sides. Having been an F&B director as well, I'm very intolerant of that behavior in anyone. It's inexcusable.
I fully agree. Now, talking about mentorship, there's a couple different areas we can go into here. So, one thing I see is that when you're starting your career, you necessarily don't have the power to maybe speak up because you can be essentially kicked out right away. Now, as you are more experienced, you are leading your own teams. How do those experiences stay with you as you lead mentorship and inspire others?
So I think it's a choice. I grew up in the age of wanting to learn everything I could. And I also didn't feel I was ready to be a chef until I was in my, I would say, mid 30s. I wasn't, I wasn't ready. It's a big decision. It's a taking on a very big responsibility of making your own mistakes as I saw it. And that was one of the learning lessons for me. Being underneath someone and learning, there's an air of protection as well. So you can make mistakes and there's someone there to help you, even though you are accountable, but you have some support. When you become a chef, it's all you. And you can choose to take one of two paths. You can be a mentor, you can be humble, you can make your mistakes and own up to them. And that actually exemplifies to your team that you accept responsibility for yourself. And also, I think more importantly, it shows you're a human being. And that I think gains trust. Where the other method is to lord over people, uh, keep the old brigade system in the kitchen where it's more of a military operation and people don't have that access to you as a human being. Again, I worked with the chefs who were both, I remember the chefs who taught me things. For me, it was like receiving a gift. If a chef was interested enough to invest their time into my improvement and my getting better in either technique or management, that was the most thrilling thing. Like to have someone actually work side by side and show me something. Again, like a gift. And those are the memories that I cherish. And then there are other managers I worked for who led by example. Like I had a GM at Mandarin Oriental in San Francisco who myself and my entire team would have happily walked through a wall for because of the way he managed. He treated people as humans. He knew everyone's name. He knew people's children's names. He was genuinely cared about people. And I think that's more, unfortunately, a rarity these days, and something that I'm seeing is diminished in favor of more of an ego approach. He was the person I credit with learning how to manage. I can't say that I was a very good manager before. I was the stressed out stereotypical chef. I did see the results of this. I saw that you can lead by fear, and it will have an impact in the short term. But in the long term, you won't have that trust, and you won't have a team that really wants to stay with you. They'll stay with you because they have to. I would prefer having people stay because they want to be there and they want to be part of something that makes them feel like they've contributed something meaningful. So in a sense, that's, the choice that you can make in this industry. And that's for everyone too, not just
Absolutely.
back of the house.
Yes, and what I keep hearing is you are a learner. And for anyone who's not watching this video but listening on the podcast, behind Adam is this giant wall of these amazing set of books, which goes into the trend that learning is something that clearly is a big part of your journey as a person, as a professional. And I really appreciate that you're able to say, okay, I wasn't the best manager at one time, but I learned and I don't want to be that way anymore. And I think that's a wonderful first step, I think, for a lot of people, that's very hard to make.
It's a difficult step. It's something that when I was being ritualistically tortured and abused, I remember feeling horrible about it. But at the same time, you feel like, if I can put up with this, if I can make it through this exercise, then I can maybe be successful in my own right. And
Yes.
so there was that. But then I remember I owned a restaurant with my wife in Evergreen, Colorado. And it was a small restaurant. We actually had a national reputation, and it was a great, great experience. I had a young, I guess he was a stage, and he just came out of culinary school. And he was a little kid. And I guess it was his first week in the kitchen. And we had a bread starter. So we made our own bread in the restaurant. And so there was a young stage who came in, and he was absolutely green. So um, he came in, and we had this bread starter, and we had worked to keep this bread starter alive, and it had been going on for about I don't know, it was 2 years old at that point, but it was something that we were proud of, and it was just bread starter, but it was the bread starter. So he was fumbling around the kitchen, and he knocked over the bread starter. And so we tore into him. And as you would expect, he was lucky he didn't get fired. I think it was his like second day or something. But the look of fear and disappointment with himself and almost shame was something that stuck with me. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to make him feel worse about it. It was a mistake. It was starter. He didn't set off a nuke and blow up a country or kill anybody.
Yeah.
And we managed to save the starter and rebuild it. It wasn't a big deal. But yeah, it was a loss of product. There was work. There was something that we relied upon to make something that was part of our offering. And he felt awful about it, but genuinely, and of course that was multiplied because he had three, myself and two sous chefs screaming at him and throwing him up against the wall. And so that was one instance. And then there was another time when I was at an event, and I was working. There were actually two other times that were really, really significant in my career. One was I worked with Pierre Gagnère at an event in the US, and we were doing a lunch with another Michelin-star chef who were named, and each chef had his own brigade. So Pierre Gagnère had his crew, which I was privileged to be part of, and this other chef had his team. You could see he would, in between courses, would storm around, throw things, just create an atmosphere of tension and anger. And his team was terrified, and they would sneak over and they would watch to see what we were doing, but they were really like scared to see and were scared to be seen looking at someone else. And I watched the way Monsieur Gagnère managed us, and it was very relaxed. He talked to us, we had conversations. It was just like having a conversation, like much the way we are now. And then when it was time to plate, everyone like sprang up and knew exactly where they were supposed to be, what they were supposed to do. And they didn't want to disappoint him. They wanted to make sure everything was perfect. And we all did it together. There was no screaming, no yelling, none of that. And this is one of the best chefs in the world. And so I saw that. And at that moment, I was like, that's who I want to be professionally, I guess personally also. And then I worked with another group that was a very, it's a very renowned Michelin-star restaurant in California. I was assisting them at another event, and a bunch of volunteers came from a local culinary school, and they started to abuse them as if they were just working in their kitchen. And I was appalled. I thought the arrogance, the cruelty, and in their minds, they were getting them ready to see what it was like to work in a high level, high operating kitchen. From what I saw, it was just stupidity because these kids were donating their time because they wanted to learn, but why terrorize them and make them feel like they didn't want to be part of the industry and continue on with a career, which a lot of them, I'm sure, were like, I'm not doing this.
And that's
So
exactly the point right there. The hospitality industry has one of the highest employee turnover rates. And I'm hearing constantly that these restaurants where I'm talking with, they can't keep people there. The good ones are getting stolen. Sometimes they come back because of the culture. The other ones just leave right away. And it's like we're asking some of them to leave.
I think we're not treating them as humans, and we're not treating them with genuine courtesy. I see that in multiple operations. You should be happy you have a job, and that's your reward. And it's not enough. They would need to be part of something. They need to be treated as if they are colleagues and part of the decision making when they can. Yeah, there are lazy people. There are people that should be managed out. That's going to be in any industry. But if people are, do a good job, and because they're doing a good job, they get, ignored, and people take them for granted. Like, this server is terrific. She's great. But there's no pathway for moving forward if she wants or they want to move up. If it's just they're stuck, and their reward is they get to do their job, and usually more of it. That's when people leave. There's no leadership. There's no mentorship. And I think when people don't have any opportunity for growth, it's almost a tragic situation. For me, I constantly look for growth in my own career, but I also look to grow people who work with me and report to me. Um, if they don't want to grow, and they might be in the wrong industry. It's not always that cut and dry. I had a sous chef when I was a property chef who did not want to grow, but he was so extraordinary at his job and so reliable. And I knew that the product he put out, he was 100% engaged in and wanted it to be great and create a great experience. He didn't want to go any further. He didn't want to be a chef. He didn't want to be creative. I kept trying to get him. I didn't understand. And this is another, I guess, life lesson for me. I didn't understand, how could someone not want to create and not want to stretch their creative intelligence or push themselves out of their own comfort zone. And he didn't. He was perfectly comfortable. Came in, went home, had a family. When he was off work, he didn't care. He would come in if we needed, if there was a 911, if there was something on fire, he was there. If there was an event, he would stay late. And without question. And but loyal to a fault and incredible at his job. And I realized, okay, not everybody wants to grow in that direction, and that's fine.
I think
But
that is one of the major pieces that when you're hiring someone and you're onboarding them, you should really find out where their passion is to be, whether they want to grow in their career, whether they want something just stable. Every person has something different. And it's also taken me 15 years to see that as well.
right, that was a really, I guess, significant lesson for me because I had always pushed people, not necessarily in an aggressive way, but I always wanted people to be able to create. And I always worked with people that wanted to create dishes, to create experiences, to be better at what they did. It wasn't that he didn't want to be better. It was he wanted to go home when his shift was over. He didn't necessarily want to create something, but he wanted to execute it perfectly and consistently. And I think that was really underrated. And I think people did him a disservice. And he was at this hotel for 15 years at the time. And everyone was like, well, he's just, he just is just going along and he's doing okay. But he really needs to push himself and get out of his comfort zone. And I was like, yeah, I agree with that. And we needed to do something. And so I started working with him. And then I saw he was perfectly happy, but he did such a great job, and I couldn't get anybody to do it as well as he could. So if he hadn't done that, I would be, cooking breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so I was actually grateful for his commitment. Again, that was overlooked. The fact that he made the commitment and stayed for so long. Nobody stays in the industry or at a job. And I've been told many times by many people that look at my CV that, you have all these short stints. Again, that's another facet of the hospitality industry where people are getting their introduction to the hiring process. And I think that the hospitality industry has largely failed in that regard too. I am appalled by the level of ghosting. Um, and that really discourages people from pursuing careers and when they're not treated with the hospitality that we're supposed to be showing our guests and our colleagues.
I fully agree. There is this big disalignment of hiring and hospitality. We should be able to merge the employee journey in a hospitality way to understand them as people, to firstly not ghost, but it's not.
I mean, ghosting is just never acceptable. I am just flabbergasted by the amount that I see, the amount that I've had to put up with. In fact, a big part of my job is recruiting and retention of talent. And that involves taking the time to connect with people. And that's what we do to build our business, but that's also part of it is building a team. Part of building that team is also reaching out to people and saying, look, we're sorry, but a personal letter, not a robo letter. It's just horribly insulting. And even the least deserving of us deserve a response with respect. And who knows, maybe some of those people, if they had gotten some of those responses, would perform better too. But I've seen too many people, colleagues of mine, just get ghosted, and it's like, oh yeah, it's just the way it is, and it's gotten way, way, way worse. So
100%.
I'd like to
And
see.
I think the biggest problem is hospitality treats recruitment as a task. In most locations, it's given to a manager who's already doing way too many things. And then they're given tools made for HR experts, made by tech people who have never done a job on the floor, in the kitchen. Now they have no idea the reality of hospitality. There's a huge misalignment of how these tools function for hospitality.
Agreed. I think that those who were in the recruiting roles, and I was fortunate in my last role with Sage Hospitality, their recruiting team was amazing. It's part of the reason why I wanted to join the company was because they were so engaging and straightforward. I applied for a role in which I was rejected, but the way I was rejected was done with grace and respect. And I said to myself, I really hope that someday something comes along. And then like 3 weeks later, there was a role that opened up that they called me and said, we have this role as culinary director. Would you be interested in it? I said, sign me up.
Absolutely.
So,
If you could take over a restaurant anywhere in the world, where would it be and what type of atmosphere and food would it be?
wow, there's so many choices. It's a very, very big world. For me, I have a love affair with France and would take a restaurant in uh the countryside. It's something that I've always wanted, and something I actually had something close to that in Colorado. But to have it in France would be an amazing experience. To have something just off the beaten path, something unexpected where people would pass by and realize that unassuming, but it would have an amazing experience and something that they would tell their kids and their grandkids that we have to go back to. So that would be um, that would be I don't know, Aix-en-Provence or Cannes or in that area, somewhere in the hills outside of it though. So not quite a touristy area.
Yeah. And
Very simple food.
do you speak French?
I do. I do. I've been very fascinated with it since I worked there and was ritualistically humiliated for not speaking the language perfectly.
Yes, that. If there's any leader that's looking to maybe reshape their culture and their team, what is one advice you would give them to start with?
Be open to what works and what doesn't work. Celebrate the wins. Celebrate any successes that you have with the team around you. Make them know that they were part of it. There's no one person that can do this. Even the most celebrated chefs, if it's not their team, if their team isn't involved and engaged, they're not going to make it. I I know far too many people who believe, yes, it's their vision, but it's the efforts of the team, and they are providing a vision, they're providing a job by all means, but that team builds them and makes them who they are. So that has to be celebrated first and foremost and acknowledged. There has to be a come to grips with ego. This is a big part of it, and realize, well, do you want this ego? Do you want to be a dictator, or do you want to be someone who's trusted and mentor, and oftentimes can fulfill different roles as almost a parental figure, but just someone who's kind. So it's a lot of introspection. It's a roundabout way of getting to that word, but I think be introspective and really look at yourself, and then look at some of the leaders who are successful. And then there are leaders who are viewed as successful and they're horrible people. And then there are leaders who are tremendously successful and they've done it through being humble, kind, generally encouraging of their teams. And you have to decide, who do you want to be?
I think that's great advice. Now, if anyone is curious to maybe follow up and ask you some questions afterwards, or maybe they want to invite you to run their location for a day in France, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. It's Adam Malley Chef.
We will put Adam's link to his LinkedIn in the description. Thank you, Adam, so much for joining us today on Hospitality Folks. It was such a pleasure.
It was absolutely a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Hospitality Folks. If this conversation resonated with you, and I hope it did, I want to ask you to do one thing. Share this episode with someone in your life who's working in hospitality right now. Maybe they're just starting out. Maybe they're leading a team. Maybe they're quietly burning out and wondering if it's supposed to feel this way. This industry is full of extraordinary people who deserve to be treated with the same hospitality we give our guests. And the more we talk about it openly, the closer we get to actually changing it. So pass it on, start the conversation, and let's build something better together. You can connect with Adam on LinkedIn. The link is in the description. And come find me, Alicia Dick Wahlberg, on LinkedIn and Instagram at Alicia_Dick Wahlberg. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.